This morning, Amazon takes a shocking bite out of the Big Apple and pulls out of the deal that would have created 25,000 jobs. We'll hear from City Comptroller Scott Stringer. Plus, he'll reveal the MTA ignored warnings and misled commuters about subway delays.
Now, from 42nd and 2nd, this is Pix 11 News Close-Up with Marvin Scott.
Good morning, everyone. To many in New York, it looked like a great deal. The tech giant Amazon chose New York as the site of its second headquarters. It planned to build a massive facility in Long Island City and create 25,000 high-salary jobs. But what looked like a boon to some was a boondoggle to others. One of the sore points was the $3 billion in tax incentives the city and state offered Amazon. Local residents, they feared the influx of so many new people would overwhelm their community. The unions objected to Amazon's non-union policies. Now, the deal erupted into a political battle, and on Thursday, Amazon decided to pull the plug. My colleague Shirley Chan has that story.
A stunning announcement from Amazon. The deal to open their second headquarters in Long Island City is off. A blow to Mayor de Blasio and Governor Cuomo, who put their differences aside to back the plan, but a win for those against, like Councilmember Jimmy Van Bramer, who criticized Amazon for being anti-union.
Amazon has a track record of oppressing workers, and they deserve to be represented by unions. Amazon is a bad employer.
Opponents have been particularly angered by the $3 billion tax break the state and city agreed to lure the online retailer to Long Island City.
Let me say this, $3 billion plus, $3 billion plus in corporate welfare.
But Van Bramer could barely get that point across by people who supported the deal and the jobs and revenue it would bring to the neighborhood. This owner of a nearby restaurant, one of them.
Parade that you're going to throw for screwing over all our jobs?
Governor Cuomo releasing a statement today that reads in part, a small group of politicians put their own narrow political interests above their community, which poll after poll showed overwhelmingly supported bringing Amazon to Long Island City, the state's economic future and the best interests of the people of the state. One of those politicians Cuomo is referring to, State Senator Michael Gianaris.
The news for Amazon is that they're not bigger than New York City, at least not yet. They may think that they get to dictate terms to governments, but thankfully we're not yet at that point.
Just weeks ago, I traveled to Seattle to take a look at the effect Amazon has had on that city since they opened their first headquarters. Residents there with mixed feelings. Although the tech giant has brought a great deal of wealth to the city, they've also exacerbated issues of traffic and lack of affordable housing. In a statement today, Amazon saying in part, while polls show that 70% of New Yorkers support our plans and investment, a number of state and local politicians have made it clear that they oppose our presence and will not work with us to build the type of relationships that are required to go forward with the project we and many others envisioned in Long Island City.
Our thanks to Shirley Chan for that report. Now, here to help us understand the ramifications of Amazon's decision and just how it will impact the economy of the city, I'm pleased to be joined now by New York City Comptroller Scott Stringer. Good to have you with us. First question.
Good to be on the show.
It was a surprise to everyone. No one expected this. Were you shocked by this?
Well, actually, I wasn't shocked, but I have to tell you that the way that this deal began really showed that it wasn't going to see fruition. This deal was constructed in secret with the governor and the mayor. It was not a public review. We did not engage in a uniform land use review process. That's a big word for saying give the people in the city a chance to review the subsidy package, to look at issues facing community like in Long Island City. And so the whole process was not about negotiation and trying to find solution. It was about rushing something through that you just don't do in New York City. The best deals that have been made in New York come through a planning process, and it starts with the local community board, it starts with borough presidents and the city council, and then you do EISs, and you create an opportunity for people to weigh in and shape a project. No big development project in this city that goes through a public review process ends up the same as it started. But here, the attempt was to not have that process, to do this in secret. And once we found out that there was a $3 billion subsidy package that was as of right, once we found out that there was no work done on Long Island City to talk to people, when we found out that these were not union jobs, there was no union neutrality, then people started to raise serious questions.
So you're saying they were justified in pulling out?
No, I think what happened was that the deal as it was constructed without public review doomed the project.
Doomed from the outset.
Doomed the project. And look at what happened. There was never a serious discussion around the table with community leaders, elected officials. Even the city council hearings was just screaming matches. There wasn't an ability to shape what an economic development project should look like. So we as a city have now ought to start reviewing some of what happened so that we can do better next time.
So the people who were complaining about it, they had legitimate grievances?
Absolutely, because here was a subsidy package of $3 billion. To this day, no one ever unpacked that. We gave them in the city $1.3 billion in subsidies, the REAP and ICAP program. So $1.3 billion goes to Amazon. But this program has also helped 202 companies in the city. They get a total of $32 million. So one company gets $1.3 billion, 202 companies share $32 million. That had to be discussed.
So this leaves the mayor and the governor with egg on their face, doesn't it?
Look, I think it shows that in order to do development planning in this city, you always get a better result when you're up front. There's a public review process.
Transparency.
Well, that's transparency 101 is where it's at. And I do fault the mayor for not taking this project to a public review process.
So the question is,
in my view,
what's the impact on the New York economy as the result of them pulling out? They were going to create 25,000 jobs at $150,000 salaries.
Look, if we could have shaped a project that met the needs of Long Island City residents, that met the needs of the critical union jobs that we so desperately need in the city, and if a project could have been shaped for the people in Queensbridge houses and so many other constituencies, then yes, a project should move forward. But that's not what happened here. This project was supposed to be a done deal. It was done in the middle of the night in secret. And while there will be a blame game that's going to go back and forth for the next couple of days, if you just put that aside for a second, we need to create real economic development in our city. We need to create real affordable housing. We need to stop doing these deals in the middle of the night without community review. But that's the way we do these. That's the way we have to do this work.
But wouldn't this have been a boon to the city's economy with all these jobs, 25,000 people?
But we never had an opportunity to analyze that. What is the cost for those jobs? There was never an open discussion about the ICAP and REAP program and the $1.3 billion that we were going to spend. We want union jobs in this city. That's a legitimate discussion. None of that happened. So now the question is, where do we go from here?
Where?
And we have to understand that projects, whether it's building affordable housing that sometimes is not actually affordable for people in our communities, though we call it affordable housing, we have to change our ways. We have to engage in a more robust land use review process. The city council over the years has passed the mayor's housing plan to rezone neighborhoods, only to find out later that those rezonings have actually increased the inability for people to pay rent in communities. So the way we do things has not been in the interest of the people in the city.
Okay, so Amazon, gone. Done deal. Finished. Okay, we'll take a break. Want to go on to the next thing.
Sure.
You had something on Friday that could be quite controversial. You want driver's license for all the undocumented immigrants who are in the city. We'll talk about that right after the break. Stay with us as we continue our discussion with Scott Stringer. Back now with City Comptroller Scott Stringer. On Friday, you had a press conference, and it's bound to create a great deal of controversy. You are calling for licensing all the undocumented immigrants who are in New York City, throughout New York State. This has to be approved by the legislature. Tell us about that.
That makes sense. And as someone who crunches the numbers around here, here's what would happen. There's about 150,000 undocumented. individuals that would apply for a driver's license, according to our analysis. That would raise millions of dollars, some of which would go to the MTA. But it would also give the people who have these licenses the ability to get different jobs, to travel to those jobs. It would help families of undocumented immigrants. And it just makes economic sense. It makes sense for the families. And I think we should urge the legislature to do this immediately.
Now, this is going to create, something. You get President Trump down on you, of course, on this, particularly his opposition to sanctuary cities and harboring what he calls the undocumented immigrants.
It is utter, complete nonsense. I'm talking about these issues from an economic perspective, how we help New York by raising revenue, but also help the families and the individuals of undocumented immigrants who, by virtue of having that license, open the doors to better paying jobs and the like. That's what this is about.
With all due respect, if I read correctly, it's only going to generate like $5 million
a year. Up to $12 million.
Then I saw the wrong figure.
No, but it's a money generator. It helps 150,000 individuals. And let me just remind everybody, the immigrants who come to our city pay billions of dollars in taxes. We would not be the city we are today without the good, hard work of our immigrants, undocumented and otherwise. So let's stop the Trump game and let's do what's right for our city and our state and pass laws that make it easier for families to take care of their children and to work. And that's the bottom line.
So this would impact about 150,000 undocumented right in the city.
Potentially.
But this would need the state legislature's approval.
Yes.
Okay, let's move on to another issue because you also had another report. You've been very busy.
I'm a busy guy, Marvin.
You've got lots of audits, lots of investigations. You looked into something that tens of thousands of New Yorkers are confronted with every day, delays in the subway. You did an investigation, and you have found that the MTA was involved in a massive cover-up regarding the delays.
These executives knew very clearly that they were not putting out the correct data on subway delays. And what our investigation uncovered was that there were some 500,000 delays that they could not categorize. They were unknown delays. So rather than own up to the public and say, look, we now know that there are 500,000 delays on the books, but we don't know why it's happening. They didn't want to tell the public that. So what they did was they took those unknown delays and put them through different buckets of delays so that no one would see a category of unknown delays. MTA executives know this. We have the data and the documents, and this further erodes the public trust with the MTA.
So it's all a matter of how you read the numbers.
No, this is what the investigation showed. The way we read the numbers is what the numbers are. 500,000 unknown delays that they then put in different buckets so that the public would not know, that they didn't know what were the delays, what was happening with these delays. That's a huge number of delays that happened that they couldn't understand why it was happening.
Now, how far back does this go?
This goes back since, I think, 2013. So it's been fairly recent in the last 5 or 6 years. But here's something else we found out. Now they're doing it again. So they're talking about another category of delays, but they're not using the work that they're doing as data for delays. So if a train is delayed because there's work in progress, the MTA doesn't want you to know that. And that's ridiculous. And this is further, again, hurting the confidence of our city with our transportation system. Now, people are paying increases in fares, but they can't get a straight answer out of the MTA.
But now, under the new leadership of Andy Byford, hasn't he instituted some reforms to change all this?
Absolutely. Better, but why isn't he holding the executives accountable to what we've uncovered? And yes, it's easy to change things, and he has, and I'm happy he has. Part of the reason why he changed things is he knew we were doing this investigation, so this was going to come to light. So, when we arrive at the MTA and start asking for data, we tip them off, and that's good. That's part of my job. It's not to play gotcha. It's to change policy. I know we changed policy with these recommendations or this investigation, and that's what I'm supposed to do, and we call them out on it.
Okay, let me ask you this other question regarding MTA. Governor Cuomo's effort to take total control of MTA. What do you think of that?
Well, look, we need somebody in charge, and we need someone in charge right now.
You support that?
I do. I think that someone has to be in charge, and if the governor wants that, then we should work to come up with a system that gives the city the input it needs and also strong leadership at the MTA. This crisis is real. We're going to have to come up with some $40 to $50 billion to fix our subway system. We have to realign our bus system. My reports and investigations have shown how outdated the bus system is. We've done surveys showing that strap hangers have lost jobs and they're losing economic opportunity. So we are continuing to push for strong leadership to pass a budget that reflects the needs of the system.
Okay, let's move on to something else. Somewhat of a crisis going on at City Hall right now in City Council. Council member Ruben Diaz Sr. Homophobic remarks. He's big controversy. They want him to resign. He's refusing to. They've removed him from the committee. Where do you stand? What do you think should be done about that?
Everybody was well aware of the homophobic nature of his comments and his beliefs, and I find it repugnant. But people played along with Diaz because he is a powerful politician, and I think that has to end. Early on in this latest debacle, I said that the city council should immediately remove him from his committee because the council has the ability to do that. I'm glad after days they decided that they would make that move, but I do think the council made a mistake because the committee that Reverend Diaz actually was in charge of is about for-hire vehicles, and a lot of transportation issues came before that committee. He didn't handle it well, and he didn't do a particularly good job. But you don't close the committee, you just get rid of the offender. So I think we should have a committee that focuses on this, and I think Reverend Diaz should resign and get on with his life.
They just simply eliminated the committee. But
I wouldn't have.
Is there any legality, any way of removing him if he refuses?
Yeah,
they can censure him.
He gets appointed. He could be censured. There's a lot of things. I don't think removing the committee helped the conversation about for-hire vehicles in the city, because that's going to be a big issue ongoing. But I do think they finally got it right by getting rid of him.
Okay, before we go to the break, quick question. We have a public advocate special election next week. You endorsing anyone in that election?
Not yet, and the days are dwindling, but I can urge everybody to get out there and vote, keep up with our, we had record turnout. Let's have record turnout for public advocate and show the world that we're participating.
Well, you're the guy who holds the purse strings over the city. Isn't this really a waste of taxpayers' money? $23 million for a special election when you have a primary for that same office coming up in June.
Look, the only thing I would say about elections is that democracy is expensive, and there's a vacancy. We have to fill it. We have a city charter.
Okay, I got more political questions, but let's take a break. Okay, you take a breath. We'll take a break.
Fair enough.
Okay, we'll be right back. Back now with New York City Comptroller Scott Stringer. We were talking about politics before the break. Let's pick up on it again. Let's pick up on Mayor de Blasio. You've been somewhat of a thorn in his side these past couple of years.
Just doing my job, Marvin.
I knew you would say that. But he's now expressed the notion perhaps to run for President of the United States. How does that sit with you?
Look, I think he's going to have a hard time out there, but far be it for me to tell someone what to run for. He certainly has the right to do that. Look, all we ask of the mayor is to keep his eye on this city. This is a 24-hour city. Tragedy happens. Excitement happens. Being mayor of New York is really about a full-time focus. That's why it's so hard to run for office after you're done with mayor. It's hard.
That's a nice political response. Okay.
No, but it's not political. It's the reality. It's it's hard. Even as controller, I get nervous when I leave for a vacation with my wife. Like, what's going to happen? Can I get back in time?
You get nervous leaving as controller, but what about leaving for controller to become mayor? I can't let this broadcast end with all the broadcasts you've been on. I've always asked you the question. So when are you going to announce your candidacy for mayor?
Well, look, we took a big step a couple of weeks ago. We're now exploring, I'm now exploring a run for mayor. We have begun a series of fundraisers around the city. I call them thought raisers. We're asking people to give small dollar donations that will become matched, that will give us the money that we need to run. And in the process, having thought raisers to discuss the issues of the city, talking about education, talking about affordable housing, people who are concerned about their children, concerned about homelessness. So I'm traveling the city, sitting in living rooms, listening to what people care about, and hopefully getting a couple of dollars to throw into the campaign so that if we decide to go, the money will be there. So we've taken a big step.
So you're no longer telling me the door is open a little bit. Sounds like you're a candidate.
No, we are actively beginning what I think is a long process of figuring out running for mayor. So I'm engaged in doing that, and we're going to be in living rooms coming to a borough in a neighborhood near you. I'm very excited about it, and look, at the end of the day, the first thing I have to think about every day is the finances of the city. I have to make sure that our office is rooting out waste and fraud, holding the mayor accountable, talking about the economy of our city. And in my spare time, I'm going to go out and have conversations with real New Yorkers of all different backgrounds and raise the money in small donations, the money that you need to run for mayor.
In your spare time?
In my spare time.
Let me ask you this about, let's turn to NYCHA, city's crisis in public housing. We now have a federal monitor in here. Is NYCHA fixable? Is this the answer?
No, we have no choice. NYCHA has to be fixable. But a monitor is nice. A big check with that monitor would be better. We need the money to fix the faucets and the lead removal and all the issues at NYCHA. You know, I've done more investigation and audits of NYCHA than all the controllers in modern history. I went out there my first audit I did was on NYCHA. I care very much about the future of the 400,000 residents. And, you know, we use fancy titles, receivership, monitor. We need money and a strong management structure in NYCHA, and we have not gotten any of that in the time that I've been looking at these issues.
But the federal monitor is a step in the right direction. Do you think, should there be a federal takeover?
No. And right now what the federal government should do, what the Trump administration should do, is start funding the NYCHA developments to make the repairs, to remove lead paint, and let's stop playing political games. This is so outrageous to me as someone who, you know, believes strongly in NYCHA and affordable housing. This is something that we should not let disintegrate. LaGuardia, the mayor, back in the 1930s, built NYCHA as a place that you could move into, raise your families, and then you are on your way to the middle class. And there has been such divestment from these buildings that we need a structure in place in New York City. The mayor's got to focus on this. You need a deputy mayor for NYCHA 24/7. You need a war room. You need to get business and community aligned. And you need funding from the federal government. Why is that so difficult? That is what motivates me every day to do these investigations, to move the debate. I've been somewhat successful, but there's a lot more to do.
Now, under the deal with the federal government, New York has to come up with $2.2 billion. Is that yes, money there?
But remember, the money will be there. But remember, that's a drop in the bucket for what's needed, and only the federal government can really come in with the resources that's necessary on such a large scale. But think about this. Remind people, Marvin, NYCHA residents and NYCHA buildings are the size of Boston, the city of Boston. So this is a city. And we're not taking care of the city.
So the bottom line is, show us the money.
Show me the money and stop the political games. And I appreciate when Secretary Carson comes here, signs some agreement and walks out. He looks as uninterested in NYCHA as anything I've ever seen.
On the subject of housing, let's get outside of public housing. Talking about regular housing, you're clamping down on landlords who are gouging people with security deposits.
Well, you know, I put forth a very powerful report that showed that because people have to put up multiple months of security deposits, that these landlords are actually holding almost $507 million, almost $500 million in people's money, and that's money that can't be used for an extra car payment, food for the kids. We want to limit security deposit, 1 month, that's it, and have people use the rest of that money to take care of themselves and their family.
So what are you doing?
So right now we're supporting a bill introduced by Assemblywoman Rosenthal, Senator Hoylman. We're working with the City Council as well to build out a broad coalition to pass the needed legislation. Our report makes it very clear that there's a real benefit to stop gouging people on rent security deposits. Look who gets hurt. Young kids who want their first apartment and middle-class people who could use that extra month's rent that's tied up in the security deposit to do things for their families.
Now, as I look at the figures here, unregulated renters, security deposits spent $507 million just in 2016.
$507 million.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's something.
These are fair market apartments. There's no reason that people should be holding your money, and it's not working for you. You know,
I'm getting that sign. We've covered a lot of ground.
This is a lot today. Well, it's great to be here.
Thank you. City Controller Scott Stringer, always good to have you on the program. That'll do it for our broadcast today. If you have any comments or wish to see this broadcast again, log on to our website at pix11.com/newscloseup. I'm Marvin Scott. Thanks so much for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, everyone.